All right, guys. We're coming back to just kind of getting the idea of, why we should study government, and some of the ideals that our founding fathers come from. So before before we get into chapter 2, which kind of goes over the Constitution and why they wrote the Constitution, we kind of got to get an idea of what they were even thinking, because, like I said last week, right? They had a blank slate. They didn't. There really wasn't much for them to go off of, except for past governments, right? But they had to decide what would be the best government that could govern, this new nation. And so, of course, they had broke away from, old England, right? They broke away from old England and kind of the king mentality of the power. God has the ultimate power, and He gave it to the kings. And so, these guys definitely paid attention to the Enlightenment era, where the Enlightenment era, the Enlightenment era was definitely challenging the thoughts of the day, right? So, how many people in here have had like Western Civ before, or understand a little bit of Western Civ? Okay. Typically, where did all of the thoughts, when we talk about how do the people, how are the people governed and their daily lives are being influenced, what institution do you believe had the most power in old Western history?
The church.
Yeah, the church, right? So if the church has your religious creeds and values, they also definitely were in control, definitely, of daily lives. So where it began to change, right? I talked about this a little bit, right? It began to change when Martin Luther decided that there was something going on with the Catholic Church, right? And he's the one who attacked the 95 Theses. What was he really saying that we should break away from the Catholic Church? Or what was he really saying when he was talking about the 95 Theses?
You talk about the original Martin Luther, right?
Yeah, not the king.
I'm trying to remember. It's been so long since that. Martin Luther was kind of just like, this isn't right. We should kind of do what you want. I know he broke off and made his own religion because he was tired. He wanted to get divorced to his wife, right? And
Not him. It was Henry VIII
that did that.
who will utilize what Martin Luther, I'm about to say king. I say that all the time. What Martin Luther was really expressing about. This is why I'm asking this question, because I think sometimes we overlook really what Martin Luther was trying to do. And I kind of want to get that straight real quick so that we have a good understanding.
Did he believe the Pope had too much power?
He did believe the Pope had too much power. But what was it? What was he really attacking within the Catholic Church? Yes, ma'am.
Wasn't it kind of separation of church and state?
What do you mean by that?
Like, he wasn't saying he was kind of like, good to have your religion and go by that stuff, but it shouldn't rule the governing power. It can be an influencer, but not a direct, okay, this is what we're doing because this is what they said we could do.
Okay, it is part of that. But one of the things that really he was focusing on in his 95 Theses was the Catholic Church wanted to build a new cathedral, but they didn't have any money, right? Because typically the Catholic Church, how it works is everything that, like the church, it was tied to the land. And the reason why, the Catholics really did something like that is because typically whenever someone dies or passes away, really the throne or whatever the power goes to, your next heir, right? But in the Catholic Church, right, the popes they don't marry or nothing like that, so they didn't really have a next heir. So everything really was typically influenced by the one pope, but then you had the other attributes of the Catholic Church. So they needed to build a new cathedral, but they didn't have any money to do it. So what some of the churches were beginning to do, they were beginning to sell indulgences. And selling indulgences is saying that of course, you have like the 10 Commandments, and one of the commandments, thou shalt not kill. Well, of course, a knight's whole lifestyle is killing. A knight would kill for the king, and in exchange, it would get some land, and it also would get some serfs or whatever under these knights. Well, if you're Catholic and you're killing, that's a sin. Well, what happens to you when there's a sin? You don't really get the opportunity to go to heaven, right?
You get to pay.
Yeah, so what they was doing, because they needed the money, they said, hey, I'll tell you what. You come to me, you give me so much, and I'll just use a number. You give me $100, I'll tell you, you're okay, and you do 5 Hail Marys, you good. Now that lessens the time you spend, because in the Catholic Church, you spend time in purgatory before you go to. So this was lessening your time. So this could be, you could go for your family members, like, hey, I want to, take some time off for my family members. And so Martin Luther was saying, wait a minute, man doesn't have that kind of power. Man doesn't have the power to grant another man sovereignty, right? It only can be God. And so that's what he was doing. It was everybody else who said, oh, well, let's just break away from the religion as a whole. So really, Martin Luther wasn't trying to break away, although there will be a fashion of that is called the Lutheran Church that will quote themselves. But Martin Luther Martin Luther especially, that wasn't his main goal. His main goal was just saying that there's a corruption going on, and we need to work on the corruption, right? And so, because of that, Europe will go through, their era of really this change. And one of the biggest changes in the Enlightenment era is science. Why is science and religion always, it's almost like science and religion are stepbrothers. Why are they always fighting?
Because they contradict each other.
Okay, because science is, what is really science really their main point as a scientist?
Figured out the truths of the world, basically.
Okay, and how do we find the truths?
Looking at facts, hard evidence.
Okay, let's say, okay, what do you mean by that? Because I'm going to want to get it clear. You said look at hard evidence.
Stuff that you can actually see, like,
Okay.
actually observe. Yeah.
Okay, so scientists believe in, hey, and in the Enlightenment, man, you had Copernicus and all of these, you had the microscope coming. So people were looking at the world, and they were seeing it totally different, because if you control the information, you control the narrative, right? You control the narrative, and you control the information. So for the longest, it was stated that the sun revolved around the earth. Is that true? How does it go?
The earth revolves around the sun.
Okay, but if you change the concept, so I want y'all to think about the concept. If you say the sun revolves around the earth, which one is more important? So that means they're placing man over nature. But here you get these scientists who are saying, wait a minute, whoa. First, that's not correct. We are not the center. We're not the end all, the be all. Really, in all actuality, is we revolve around the sun. And that was a big blow to religion, because religion for the longest had that over everybody's head. But here you get these guys, which is why in the beginning they were trying to get them all out. Heresy, all that. Heretics. They were using all of those terms, because they was like, we got to get these guys up out of here, because it will change the mindset of the people, right? So the reason why I'm saying all of this is because the Founding Fathers kind of will look at that, and when they're creating their blank slate, the government that they believe will be the one that will stand the test of time is the one we definitely deal with today. And so these guys come from free thinking, which is why it was unheard of to be in that mindset, to be such a free thinker, because England told you, the King of England told you exactly what to do, which is why they began to, a small group, not even a large group, and that's an interesting thing. Like, we think this whole American Revolution was like this, it grew over time, but in the beginning, it was a small few people. Like, a lot of the colonists, they were not down with leaving England, because it's this mindset. If we leave and don't win, it's over. Because if we go over to England, if we get tried over in England, oh yeah, it's guillotine, off with the head, right? And so when you think about even in our politics, even today, 2018, do you understand, as individuals, you act in a powerful way to affect our society? Like, we all have a stake in the game, right? But I don't think we do our part is because we don't pay enough attention, or we don't want to. It's not fun. It's not glamorous. It's not the thing that, you know, I'd rather be on my social media or whatever, and versus kind of looking at what's going on with politics, right? And so we got to begin to understand, well, what is going to be our part? Maybe you don't have to study politics. You don't have to get a degree in political science or something like that, but maybe you can start paying attention to, you know, what's going on locally. Get involved locally, and control, you know, where you live, you know, or begin to help make change where you live. Like, let's just say there's things in your community you don't like. Well, find out how do you make those changes. That's why I think, you know, coming to a class like this, just learning the foundation and the framework makes it a lot easier for you to really figure out where do you fit. Because everybody can't go out and march. Everybody's not going to be a government official. So you got to figure, what is your part? What is your role? So what does government do, right? We know Americans prefer a voluntary group of government action. Only 24% of Americans trust the federal government, right? People don't trust the American government, right? But even though only 24%, the U.S. operates a large government. So I was looking at this thing, right? So I just want to kind of just real quick ask a question. How much, or how, I'm thinking my question. How much do you think government affects our lives on a daily basis? Let's just break it down to one day.
At least 95%.
Okay, because
You got to start with the roads to even get anywhere. And
okay, let's even go before that. How do you wake up?
in a house that's through a mortgage that you probably got financed through the government.
Okay, well, let's go with, how do you wake up? Do you have an alarm? Do alarm wake you up, typically?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Bad.
the alarm, if it's like the old school alarm, it's plugged into a wall and it has electricity. Or you're using your cell phone, correct? To wake you up. Your cell phone is connected to a company, right? That has rules that are ruled by what is called FCC. So the moment you wake up, government is in our lives. Now, not like they're sitting down at your bed saying, hey, it's time to wake up. But everything that we have, everything we deal with, it starts off. So at 6:30, or let's say you get up at 6:30. So 6:30, your day starts. The alarm rings from your cell phone that's connected to a company. Then you go and take a hot shower that's connected to the gas or electric company that is run by the government. Then you eat. The food you get is regulated by the government. The pan that you use is regulated by the government. We haven't even got out the house yet, and government is already in everything we do. Now you go out the door, like you said, either it's a house you are buying and it is purchased through the government, because if you don't pay your taxes, guess what they will do? Come get your house. So, and if you're not doing that, you're renting, and renting is a company that's connected. So you have all of these things, and we haven't even gotten our car. Now it's time to get in our car. What do you need to drive?
A license.
You gotta have a driver's license, and you gotta get that every so often. You gotta go to the DMV and get you a new driver's license every so often. Now you have the license, what's on the car itself for you to drive.
Time.
You gotta have the license plate,
Yeah.
right? So each state has a different way that you have to do it. In the state of Delaware and also in Maryland, right? You gotta, before you can, they say, okay, you gotta go through a mission test, right? You fail that, guess what? You can't get a license plate. You gotta fix whatever they are telling you you need to fix. So anyway, now we're just in the car. You bought your car off a lot, off of somebody where you pay taxes, which goes to, some of it goes to the government. Now, like you said, get on the road. The roads are governed by the government. You get to this school, Cecil College, regulated. How are you paying for classes if you're not paying out of your pocket?
To the government giving you money.
Financial aid, which is $1 trillion business right now. So when do we think about, like a lot of people, you will hear a lot of people like the group, man, my mind slips me all the time, libertarians. They will say, we want little government. We don't want them in our business. Whether you want them in your business or not, they still are there. We have to ask, how big do you want them to be? Now, that's a different kind of question. All right? So, compared to citizens, now, I thought this was interesting. Compared to citizens of other nations, the U.S. paid less taxes. Around 1/2 of all economic activities go to the government. So we say right now our budget is about a 4.1 trillion annually. 61% of that, of the federal spending goes towards 4 programs. Military top, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So no matter if you're talking about your private life, no matter if you're talking about your civil life, government is involved in some kind of way, either through some type of formal or informal institution that is controlling the reins of what government will do for us, right? So here's a couple of other facts, right? When it says, yet the United States operate a large government. Here's how it is laid out. There is 1,300 federal agencies and 15 cabinet departments. There is 2.2 million federal civilian employees. Did y'all hear about what President Trump just counseled for civil employees?
The raise.
Yeah, he said, I'm not going to let you get a 2.1% across the board raise. It's going to save us billions of dollars. I don't know how the people feel about it. I don't know when the last time they got a raise, but the guy's he's stopping that. 2.5 million active and reserve armed forces, 4.4 million state employees, 12.2 million local employees, 500,000 elected officials, and it says a total almost 22 million people touch every aspect of our lives. 22 million people, right? So, who are we? If you were to say, remember we tried to ask the question, what does it mean to be an American? And we had a couple things going and then we kind of staled out real quick. Who are we? Do you believe in this statement right here?
Yeah. Because 50 years ago, we are a totally different beast on its own.
Uh-huh.
So it is always changing. You can just look at technology 50 years ago and look at how far we've come just in that aspect.
Right. So we are changing. So we definitely are. So when you ask the question, who are we? you're probably gonna have to just give, or you would probably just give a statement of, man, it's forever changing. Especially when you talk about with you guys coming in, the millennials, you guys have a different outlook than even my generation thought about, right? I was talking to somebody today, and we were just talking about what's the difference in how millennials see the world versus how we see the world. And some things on the list was something like, all you have ever seen research-wise is Wikipedia. But what's the first thing all academic instructors tell y'all not to use?
Wikipedia.
Yeah, but that's all y'all have ever known, right? Y'all don't really, I mean, it's not that y'all don't know, but Wikipedia has been in existence ever since you guys have been able to research. So for you, you're looking at it like, why are you telling me I can't use a source that is right here in front of me, right? Academically or scholarly is what we will always try to say. Another thing I think they pointed out, I'm trying to think, because we were just talking about a couple things on the list. I kind of forgot. Oh, you guys typically, starting from the age of 2, don't know anything but electronics. Like your whole life has been molded around using an iPad, iPod, or some type of device has been in your hand ever since you were a young child. So there's a lot of things that, of course, when I was growing up, electronics was in our life, but it looked a little different. So, the Declaration of Independence articulates 7 big ideals. 7 big ideals. One of those ideals was liberty. It's what they were searching for, what they wanted. Self-rule, limited government, which is why they wrote the Constitution the way that they wrote the Constitution. Each article deals with the 3 branches of government, how they are to govern, and they cannot, and they do not govern outside of what is written in the Constitution. Now, the interesting thing, though, is when you read the Constitution, it's kind of vague. And so if you know how to read the Constitution and you can explain the Constitution that fits your mentality or your ideal, you can utilize the Constitution in any kind of way. But it has to definitely be under the rules and laws that were set out by the Founding Fathers in that secret meeting, right? They believed in individualism.
Wait, so that's his Declaration of Independence.
Yes, sir?
You said you were talking about the Constitution, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying when they were writing so I'm talking about the third one. This is the Declaration of Independence of what it pointed out, which is the document that will help them write the Constitution.
Okay.
And so in the Constitution, when it says limited government, they pointed out exactly what government can do and what they cannot do, is what I'm kind of adding on to.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the fourth one, individualism, right? Everybody has an individual right. You have the opportunity to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And the pursuit of right to life, right? You have this individuality. We don't want to really stifle that in any kind of way, is what the Founding Fathers were trying to speak about. The American dream. The American dream. What do you think is the American dream? What do
Blonde
you-
girl in a 2-seater.
Huh?
A blonde girl in a 2-seater.
Blonde girl in the 2-seater? Right? Because at one point, the American dream looks a little bit different. Because in the 50s, you would always hear house, white picket fence, 2.5. Now, I don't know where they got the 2.5 kids. I don't know where's the 0.5 of a kid. I don't know how that worked, but that's what we would always hear. 2.5 children.
Maybe it's a dog, a pet.
Could be, right? Almost like, I don't know if you guys ever remember or heard your parents ever speaking about in the 60s and 70s, there was a TV show called Leave It to Beaver. That's kind of what the American dream was kind of made after. That's what life was supposed to be. The husband goes out, he works, the wife stays at home, does the domestic work and the cleaning, the cooking, and taking care of the kids and the homework and all of that, and such a happy family. Can you really live off of one salary nowadays?
Definitely not.
Right. Unless you're making a lot of money, you can kind of swing that, right? Because it's kind of tough in our society, which is, I don't know if you guys are paying attention, women nowadays are not marrying as young as they used to, because most women are saying to themselves, I want to get my career off the ground before I start having children and doing all of these things. So a lot of women are holding till their mid-20s, some are holding into their 30s, and so now you're having women coming into the workforce, and they're coming as professional women, which is something that wasn't happening, early on. So the American dream, I think, which is interesting that they use that, but I think just like all of the 7 that we're going to talk about, they all will change with time, right? They all change with time. Equality. That's an interesting one for me, especially when you talk about how will we define equality? Because even in the time of the Declaration of Independence, equality wasn't for everyone. Especially it was not for women. It was not for white men who did not own any land. And definitely we know that for slaves. So here are 3 distinct groups that make up the American society who are out of the loop of equality. So I always when I see this, I think this is interesting. And then the last one, faith in God, right? But we do believe in American politics, separation of church and state, to some degree, right? But these are the big ideas. So let's look at these big ideas, right? Liberty, the land of the free, right? Home of the brave, land of the free. So freedom means that government will protect your life, your liberty, and your property from others, including public officials, in order to permit you to pursue your goals. Now, typically when you have a house and they want to expand the road, can government just come and expand the road? Do they have to come and ask you, I know that this is your property, can we expand the road?
Isn't it called eminent domain?
Yeah, they have part of your land. They have already stated that if we ever have to stretch out the road, we have the ability as a government. We don't have to come and knock on your door and say, can we please, use part of your land. Now, there is an interesting thing. I live in Middletown, and on Main Street, where it is a historical district, you cannot expand or change the street in that area. However, I'm hearing, I don't know how true this is in Delaware, in Middletown, because they're growing exponentially. Like, their numbers in Middletown have reached 300 to 400% growth in the past 10 years. And they're talking about on Main Street where traffic, one side of the traffic is going to go one way and the other side is going to go another way. Now, I don't know how they're going to do that because there's not a lot of space on Main Street as it is now, but that's what's in the talk. But really the historical district, they really can't do too much. They can't change it. They can't, do too much to the historical district. So, land of the free. So our book talks about 2 sides of liberty, right? You have the negative, whereas the lack on an individual, it constrains or to help other strong proponents, like the libertarians, who believe in minimal government. So they want to say liberty, but at a minimum. Or you have positive liberty, which requires the community to help everyone satisfy their basic needs. Have you seen the new Nike ad?
Colin Kaepernick thing?
Yeah. Did you see the reaction of the people to Nike's ad? Where did you see the guy that burned his shoes with his feet in the shoes? We have liberty, but we need to sometimes. I mean, I don't understand, how, But anyway, but yeah. So for liberty, there's two sides of liberty. There's a negative, and then there's a positive. Some will say we need government in our lives because if we don't have government in our lives, you may could have the people who burn their shoes with their feet in it. What if we gave them power? What would it be like? So maybe we do need a in between to definitely so that we can make better decisions. I don't know. That's something you would have to ask yourself. All right. Liberty though has grown with time, right? It is understood that some scholars see the inevitable growth of the reflective American ideas, and it is always a constant battle, right? Because it can't go either way. What are you willing to give up in order to gain, right? Many of you guys were real young when 9/11 happened, right? But in order for protection, there were certain liberties that was given up. Okay, so understand anytime we're talking about change, you got to give up something. There's something you're going to have to give up, and that's a hard thing to do, especially if you're talking about. There's 9 of us in this room. If all 9 of us were super hungry, I guarantee you all 9 of us will think about something different that we would want to eat. But we'd have to figure out, with the 9 of us, we only can go to one place. We would have to figure out the place that we all could agree on to go and eat. Right? How hard do you think that would be?
To compromise?
Yeah, all 9 of us, and we only can go to one. The car is only going to go to one place.
It'd be pretty difficult at first, but eventually somebody would have to take the L and just.
And have to go and eat.
Yeah.
Right. What would you think would be some of the barriers?
Well, some people would not like a certain type of food or a certain place. So they would
Okay.
be like, yeah, I'm not going there at all.
Okay.
And then other people would be like, I don't really care for that, but I'll go there. So those people would have to come over to their side. Like the people that don't want to change at all will probably get their way most of the time. I think
Okay.
that's how it is.
Who are the most stubborn?
Yeah. Whoever's the most stubborn ends up getting their way most of the time because they hold out the longest, and then the other side will just give up and.
Because everybody's super hungry. Right. Because there will be a lot to take in, right? Because somebody might be a vegetarian. Somebody will be like,
Yeah.
I don't eat meat at all. And you're going to take me to McDonald's. What am I going to really eat? I mean, I can eat a salad, but what if I don't want to eat that salad?
Can you even eat the salad there? Like I feel like the dressings have.
Oh, no, it kills it. No, it definitely, the dressing kills the whole salad at all of these restaurants when we think about it. And not even that. The sodium that's in restaurant food is out now. But anyway, the reason why I'm saying that is it's not an easy task for a group of people to come together and make a decision because everybody's going to come with what they think is important. And so when you think about liberty, you got to kind of say to yourself, okay, if I give up this, can I live without that? So that's why I think that's a big idea. Self-rule, right? This is the idea that the legitimate government flows from the people. Do y'all believe government truly flows from us?
It doesn't feel like it anymore.
Okay, tell me why you think, what is it about that doesn't feel like that anymore.
Because the government is so big compared to like individuals at this point. Like they say that that the federal government is a representation of us, but it's really not if you think about it. Like how much did each person really do to affect who's in office right now? Not much. You probably like 0.01% if you even voted. Yeah, and if it's actually like real, like if the voting system isn't rigged, which for all we know it might be.
Might be compromised.
Yeah,
think we
there's
were-
the lights
The
were on.
Kremlins are in there.
I think we were born into our government so that we are products of the government, not the government's products of us. Like when it was originally created, I think we were just born with the ideology already into us, so that we can't really break free from that because it's already a part of us.
Yeah, we like inherited the representatives of people from like a long time ago.
Okay, so it's almost like the system has already been
It's
set
already
up,
set up, yeah.
and it's just like we were just born into the system that was already set up, and it's like we probably never can get out of that kind of web. That is interesting. So this is why they said a part of our government should be a democracy in which the citizens rule directly and make the government decisions for themselves. This is why in the process we have some say so within the process itself, even if it's on a small scale or it doesn't seem like our part is very important. But the founding fathers, when they sat down, they did believe in that if they did not have some form of democracy, then it could be it could be easy to overthrow a government. Like when you see other governments, other nations, and how they deal with their government and how they can overthrow the person leading their country so easily. Here in America, it's not as easy. Even if you have pointed out that this might not be you're not really suited for the job, it's still super hard to even get that person out. I mean, like it's tough. I mean, so the laws, they do work. That's the interesting thing. The laws that were created back in 1776, they really do work. They really protect government. And when we will see a little bit, we're not going to read the whole Constitution, but however, you will begin to see in the Constitution, they write specifically exactly what can be done and what cannot be done. We also have what is called a republic because the founding fathers did not trust the masses, because at that time that they were writing the Declaration of Independence, also writing the Constitution, most of the people who were here were illiterate. To the point that most of the colonists that were here for labor purpose. They call them indentured servants, but you might as well call it slavery because a lot of them never got out of indentured servants, meaning they were indentured for a period of time. Typically it was 5 to 7 years, but most large slave owners found a way for them to get another 5 to 7 years, to the point that most of them died. They didn't even live out their contract. But there is a distinct difference, especially after, remember I told you guys, I don't know if I told you guys, but I was telling you about Nathan Bacon. After Bacon's rebellion, we began to really get a distinct difference of who was who, because we wanted to know who were slaves and who were considered indentured, although they both were treated the same. Which is, if you think about today, poor whites who vote against themselves or who vote against other groups are typically voting against themselves. So like you can get a poor white community in Alabama will vote for things that benefits them. But what they have been told is you're doing a good deed because it's the other group that's not getting it, which is kind of, you know, backwards way of thinking if you could, you know, really think about it. Which is why I say knowing about our government is important, because you can kind of point those things out. So we have both. We have a democracy and a republic, right? So we have this mix, right? So we can say the United States is a democratic republic is what we call it, because it includes both elements. So that's where they got the ideal of self-rule. The next one, limited government. Because they were so against the king having absolute power, they wanted to have limited government, which is why there are 3 branches, and each branch are to do what with each other? Check, right? Check and balance. That's why they put it that way. But it's pretty interesting, though, even though we don't call our president king, but doesn't it seem like over time, as, I don't know if you guys are really paying attention into history, as we got into different times and different events began to affect United States, some of the presidents began to get more power into the office, into the executive office, to the point now the executive office is fairly strong. Fairly strong. Almost to the point of, we're kind of back to the thing that Americans distrust back then. Because before America, under the Constitution, became the United States of America, how did the government work?
Colonies.
Huh?
You had the colonies, and then the colonies all had their own set of rules and everything.
Okay.
But wasn't it all under rule of Great Britain still?
No, this is just right after the American Revolution, and they broke out. The Constitution didn't come right away.
It was like individual states pretty much controlled their own stuff.
Right, exactly what you just said. Say it again. Right, it was called the Articles of Confederation. So it was 13 different entities, and there was no executive branch. So these 13 different entities decided what go on in their state, which is why when the Constitution was even thought of, they had to really kind of do it secretly, like, because nobody was going to really be down with losing power, because what happened is states, it was more driven on states' rights. Now we're not necessarily driven on states' rights. Now the federal government has way more power than states, right? And so this limited government is kind of what they put in place, but it did create, or will create, a more centralized government. Which makes sense, though, if you're trying to connect. Now, just think about it. What if we had 50 different states and they all did their own thing? That'd be kind of confusing. You know? So, a centralized government does make sense in certain parts, you know, but however, then you run the risk of one type of the government is going to get stronger than the other. It's the risk. That's the risk, you know. So in our limited government, we broke it down into 2 parties, and the 2 parties have 2 ways of looking at limited government. If you are a conservative and you believe in the conservative values and views, it says they believe in reduced government spending, personal responsibility, traditional moral values, a strong national defense. Is what a conservative typically believes in. And here's what I will say. I think we all have some type of conservative in all of us. You may not go 100% feet first into the pool, but I think there are certain things you want to conserve yourself, right? But then you have the opposite viewpoint, which is saying we believe in more of a cultural diversity because conservatives doesn't really talk about diversity. They have a kind of narrow mindset is what people think. They believe in that the government program should be for the needy. That's how Social Security got here. That's how Medicaid and Medicare got here. Public intervention in the economy. You as an individual have the right to a lifestyle based on your own social and moral positions. Now, that right there, to a certain extent, correct? Because if you really look at, doesn't mean you have to agree, when you really look at what is the biggest difference, what's the biggest difference you think, I'm asking you guys, between running into the end zone and kneeling because you just scored a touchdown, or kneeling because you're speaking, your platform said, I'm speaking out against social injustice. Both doing the same, they're both doing the same thing. Is one right and one wrong?
It's just the intention behind it.
Okay.
Like nothing means anything. Like stuff only means stuff because you have intention behind it.
Like shooting in self-defense and shooting to kill are two different things.
Okay.
I think because nobody gets offended when you will kneel in the end zone, but when you're doing it during the Pledge of Allegiance, other people take it to heart.
So yeah, but under the Constitution, we all have one thing, right? Freedom of speech. However you want to express it, right? Doesn't mean I have to agree with your freedom of speech. So it's like, where are we as a nation? Where do you think we feel? Because people will say, well, isn't that freedom of speech? But then someone will say, no, that's not freedom of speech. Well, what is then? Which is why for me, I don't say anything until I find how are we defining it. I don't say anything until how we're going to define it, because that's what we need to get to first. Because I may define it something totally different. Like I know for me, I grew up a military kid. If you get caught on the base at 6 o'clock when they're playing the I forgot what can't even think of the, but anyway, they're playing the bugle. You had to stop. Like if you keep walking and someone catches you, you can get in trouble for that. So you had to stop and you had to wait, and it played at 6 o'clock every day on the base. To the point of everybody would try to run off the base if you didn't want to stop. Try to run off the base before 6 o'clock, so you didn't have to stop, right? My father is a military guy. During the national anthem, he stands like this, right? Because he served this country. So for me, I wouldn't, so I look at it from a military standpoint, as well. But however, right? How am I going to define? Am I saying, man, you can't use your freedom of speech? So anyway, it's just interesting of how everybody wants to define it that fits their definition, but we're going to have to come to some kind of understanding what makes sense, or maybe not. All right. So when the framers designed our political institutions, they built suspicion of government right into the system. The federal Constitution includes an intricate system of checks and balances on power. So they were not even down with government as much as they thought they were, because they put in right away a way that is supposed to be checked to try to create some type of balance.